Welcome to HornAfrica Insight, your source for East Africa news. Today's 5 stories. Egypt's President El-Sisi softens his tone on Ethiopia and the GERD. The United States asks Ethiopia to contribute troops to a proposed Gaza security force. Nigeria's Zenith Bank shows interest in entering Ethiopia's banking sector. Sweden's foreign minister visits Eritrea amid hopes for detained journalist Dawit Isaak's release. And the Djibouti-Ethiopia port access dispute deepens. Let's get to the facts. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi said this week that Egypt has no problem with Ethiopia and that his country's only demand is that Nile water rights are not compromised and a legally binding agreement is reached on the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Speaking to African delegations at the Russia-Africa Partnership Forum Ministerial Conference, El-Sisi emphasized that Egypt's policy is based on non-interference and avoiding destabilization. He said disputes should be resolved through dialogue and political solutions, adding, Egypt has never issued threats. That last statement is worth examining. Over the past 4 years, El-Sisi and Egyptian officials have made numerous public statements regarding Ethiopia and the Renaissance Dam. Let's review the record. March 30th, 2021, Reuters reported El-Sisi saying, "No one can take a drop from Egypt's water," warning that if it happens, there will be inconceivable instability in the region. The very next day, according to Egypt Independent, he added, "Whoever wants to test us, he is welcome to come closer. And no one should imagine that he can remain far from our capability." He called Egypt's water a red line. On April 7th, 2021, Reuters quoted El-Sisi addressing Ethiopia directly. "Don't reach a point where you touch a drop of Egypt's water because all options are open." July 2021, and the National reported him saying, "Harming Egypt's national security is a red line that cannot be crossed," adding, "I and the army will have to perish first before harm comes to Egypt." December 2023, Egypt's Ministry of Water Resources and Irrigation stated that Egypt reserves its right to defend its water and national security in case of any harm. January 2024, amid Ethiopia's Red Sea access discussions, El-Sisi said, "Do not try Egypt," with a direct message to Ethiopia not to seize a piece of land. August 2025, Aram Online reported El-Sisi saying Egypt will never allow its share of Nile water to be touched, warning that anyone thinking Egypt will turn a blind eye is mistaken, and that Egypt will take all measures under international law. September 2025, in a letter to the UN Security Council, Egypt warned that any assumption it would look away is purely illusory, and reiterated it reserves the right to take all measures under international law and the UN Charter. October 2025, El-Sisi stated Egypt will not stand idly and will take all necessary measures to defend its water security. In late October, Egypt's foreign minister explicitly said no landlocked country has a role in Red Sea governance, specifically Ethiopia. And just 2 weeks ago, on December 8th, Foreign Minister Badr Abdelhadi said Egypt will use all means permitted under the UN Charter, including legitimate self-defense, if its water security is harmed. So when President El-Sisi says Egypt has never issued threats, the public record suggests otherwise. These statements, repeated over years, have consistently framed Ethiopia's actions as threats to Egypt's existence and warned of consequences, including military options. What explains the softer tone now? Perhaps diplomatic fatigue. Perhaps recognition that the Renaissance Dam is operational and threats haven't changed that reality. Or perhaps this is strategic repositioning ahead of renewed negotiations. Whatever the reason, the shift is notable, even if the history tells a different story. Egypt relies on the Nile for 97% of its freshwater. Ethiopia sees the dam as vital for power generation and development. Sudan shares concerns about reduced flow and flood control. The decade-long dispute continues. Can this softer rhetoric lead to a binding agreement? Time will tell. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio asked Ethiopian Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed this week to contribute troops to a proposed international security force for Gaza, according to diplomats who spoke to the Times of Israel. The Trump administration's plan for Gaza calls for an international force to oversee the transition reconstruction, and demilitarization of the territory following the war between Israel and Hamas. However, many countries have been wary of participation, and the United States has struggled to fill the ranks even in the planning stages. Ethiopia has not commented publicly on the request. If established, the force would replace Hamas control and secure the recovery process as part of President Trump's push for post-conflict stability in Gaza. Ethiopia is a major troop contributor to United Nations peacekeeping missions, with experience in Somalia and South Sudan. Ethiopian forces have operated in complex, high-risk environments and have earned a reputation for discipline and effectiveness in UN operations. However, deploying troops to Gaza would be fundamentally different from traditional UN peacekeeping. The political sensitivities, the intensity of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and the potential for casualties make this a far more complicated commitment. Ethiopia would also need to weigh how participation might affect its relationships with Arab states, Israel, and its own domestic politics. Whether Ethiopia accepts the U.S. request remains uncertain. But the fact that Washington is asking underscores both the difficulty of assembling this force and Ethiopia's standing as a capable military partner. Lagos-based Zenith Bank has become the latest major African financial institution to express interest in entering Ethiopia's banking sector. Senior executives, including the bank's president and board chairperson, visited Addis Ababa recently for discussions with Central Bank Governor Eyob Tekelein and officials from the Ethiopian Investment Commission. Deputy head of the commission, Zinabu Yirga, said Ethiopia welcomes giant institutions and highlighted the country's status as sub-Saharan Africa's third largest economy. He emphasized that trade expansion, infrastructure projects, and industrial development are creating significant opportunities for financial services. Zenith Bank's representative, Olukayode Akinbinu, expressed strong interest in investing in Ethiopia, with a particular focus on digital and technology solutions, as well as financing government infrastructure projects. Zenith operates across Africa and in international financial centers, offering corporate, retail, and infrastructure financing services. The bank's interest follows similar moves by other African institutions. Kenya's KCB Group has also hinted at entering the Ethiopian market as the country's first foreign bank. Ethiopia amended its banking law in 2024 to allow foreign entry through several mechanisms: establishing a subsidiary, buying a stake in an existing bank, opening a branch, or setting up a representative office. The law caps foreign ownership at 40% for new entrants and allows domestic banks to sell up to 49% of their shares to foreign investors. This liberalization is part of Ethiopia's broader economic reform agenda aimed at attracting foreign investment, increasing competition, and modernizing the financial sector. For international banks, Ethiopia represents a largely untapped market, with a young, growing population and rising demand for banking services. Whether Zenith will be able to enter soon depends on regulatory approvals and the finalization of operational frameworks. But the interest is clear, and Ethiopia's banking sector is set for significant transformation in the coming years. Swedish Foreign Minister Maria Malmer Stenergard visited Eritrea recently in the first official trip by a Swedish foreign minister since the country's independence in 1993. She met with Eritrean Foreign Minister Osman Saleh to discuss bilateral ties, regional developments, and Red Sea peace and security. She also met with Labor Minister Leul Gebreab regarding social justice programs. The visit comes amid recent releases of 13 long-held prisoners in Eritrea, including a former Olympic athlete. Rights groups have renewed calls for the release of Swedish-Eritrean journalist Dawit Isaak, who has been detained without trial since September 2001, nearly 24 years. So what was Dawit Isaak's crime? He was a journalist. In 2001, he was one of several independent journalists arrested during a government crackdown on press freedom. That year, Eritrea shut down all independent media and arrested those who worked for them. Dawit was never charged with any crime. He was never brought to trial. He simply disappeared into Eritrea's prison system. There has been no public, concrete evidence of his current condition or whereabouts. Swedish authorities assess that he is still alive, but his family has received no proof of life. The lack of transparency has fueled fears that he may have died in custody, though Sweden continues to operate on the assumption he is alive. Stennergaard described the visit as part of a new approach, aimed at improving conditions on issues including Dawit's case through quiet diplomacy. However, his family has expressed frustration at the lack of tangible progress and concrete evidence that he is alive. Eritrea has made no public comment on Dawit Isaak's case. The country has been widely accused by the United Nations and human rights organizations of gross human rights violations, including indefinite conscription, forced labor, and arbitrary detention. Eritrea has never held national elections, and its constitution, ratified in 1997, has never been implemented. The recent release of 13 prisoners has been seen as a rare positive sign, but it represents a tiny fraction of the estimated 10,000 people the UN says are arbitrarily detained in Eritrea. Whether Sweden's diplomatic engagement will lead to Dawit's release, or even proof that he is alive, remains uncertain. For now, 24 years after his arrest for the crime of journalism, Dawit Isaak remains one of the world's longest-held journalists, a symbol of Eritrea's closed political system and its refusal to tolerate independent voices. An Ethiopian delegation visited Djibouti this week amid a deepening dispute over access for Ethiopian licensed multimodal transport operators to Djibouti's port terminals. The Djibouti Ports Authority has barred these operators from accessing terminals, contradicting Ethiopia's logistics liberalization efforts and leaving many operators in limbo. Experts say only top-level political intervention can resolve the issue. Djibouti is protecting its revenue and sovereign control over port operations, while Ethiopia seeks predictable, reliable access as it works to diversify its trade routes. The legal saga surrounding the Dorala terminal adds layers of mistrust. Arbitration and court rulings have complicated the relationship, with both sides holding grievances. Ethiopia remains heavily concentrated on the Addis Ababa-Djibouti corridor for its trade, as alternatives like Berbera Port in Somaliland remain incomplete. Djibouti, for its part, hosts multiple foreign military bases and has successfully monetized its strategic geography. For landlocked Ethiopia, this creates vulnerability. Intra-regional politics further complicate matters. Ethiopia's deals with Somaliland have strained relations with Somalia, and Djibouti is watching closely. The visit signals Ethiopia's determination to assert its rights and keep the corridor functional. But resolving the dispute will require aligning technical rules, fees, and customs procedures with political assurances. Structural risks remain, and arbitration outcomes could trigger further protectionism. Ethiopia needs harmonization of procedures, continued diversification of trade routes, and a multilateral framework to reduce dependency on any single corridor. Whether friction can turn into durable interdependence depends on both sides' willingness to compromise. From Egypt's shifting tone on the GERD to U.S. requests for Ethiopian troops in Gaza, Nigeria's banking ambitions in Ethiopia, Sweden's diplomatic push for a detained journalist, and the Djibouti port access dispute, the Horn of Africa continues to navigate complex regional and international dynamics. If you found this episode informative, please like, share, and subscribe. Follow us on X for daily updates. This has been HornAfrica Insight. Stay informed.